I am so thrilled to meet the two of you and to spend a little time with you both because, I mean, you guys are so freaking talented. It blows my mind. I just love everything you do. I love the way you think, the way you present, the the beauty of each piece you make. It's just really so extraordinary and wonderful to see originality, authenticity, and incredible talent. And I know your talent goes even beyond in many other areas too. And that's what I'd really like to talk about. But I really pushed everybody. I said, I'm sorry. I love doing my podcast. There are lots of people that I get to talk to, but I need to talk to these two girls because I gotta like know them. They are cool. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it.
We're so completely excited to do this and to listen to anything that you have to say or ask, because obviously we're huge fans and we wouldn't be designing without people like you making that possible. So that's how, we're believing in creativity, for pushing the boundaries, for, defying the status quo within fashion. All of those things have let us sort of a way of saying that is possible within a really commercial system, and to really push through kind of the pressures that have been there, or the standards that are set up the traditional path of fashion. And yeah, that's what I have to say. So we're really excited to be here.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just ask some like real silly questions that you've probably answered many, many times, but in the context of all of this, my first question is, the two of you are little girls, and what kind of toys are you playing with? What are you doing? Are you drawing? What are you fighting? Are you like, what's the relationship when you're little, and what was it about?
Well, Laura and I are only 18 months apart. And
that's why I asked the question.
Laura and I are 18 months apart, and she was born, I'm the firstborn. And there isn't really a time that I remember without her. I will say that in terms of our childhood, we grew up in Northern California in a place called Santa Cruz, in our kind of rural, actually on the edge of a really beautiful old growth redwood forest where the trees are as big as, to give a perspective.
I know that area. It's incredible.
It's so incredible. And yeah, in a way, I feel like, some people grow up in New York City and the skyscrapers are their kind of, the way they define themselves in a way in terms of scale and just that kind of energy. And for us, it was, we're growing up around trees that are as tall as that. And I remember having a very magical childhood with Laura. We were outside, I would say the majority of the time, really in nature. Our father is a mycologist. So he's a mushroom expert. We grew up around a lot of people studying mushrooms. My mom's an artist, and she's done a lot of the artwork, like whether it was the fairies, she drew all the fairies in that collection for us.
Oh, I love that.
It's real cool. She drew our mushrooms that we did, and she's always been an amazing artist. So we grew up kind of in a magical area, and I think around a lot of magical people. But interestingly enough, I think I remember telling people around 5 or 6 years old, I want to be a fashion designer. My mom tells this story of giving us each like a book of, a journal that was just drawing paper. And she looked, maybe like a month after giving it to us, she kind of looked through them, but she's curious what we put in them. And I had drawn all of these really detailed fashion drawings at a really young age. And it was like, an era where I was seeing a lot of Bob Mackin on TV. Yeah. I didn't know, I was too young about this, who was making all those amazing clothes, but it really captured my imagination. And I was drawing. And she said she was just really taken aback. She was almost shocked. And my sister had drawn really detailed maps of the house.
Yeah.
So, where everything was in the kitchen. And needless to say, I think those two notebooks kind of combined into what we became later on. But it was just a really early kind of creative instinct, I would say. We've talked often, and I don't want to take up too much. I feel bad because Laura might want to say something about this.
We have plenty of time. We have plenty of time. That's right.
We talk often too about where we grew up. I think the visual culture has had a huge, I think the most foundational, the two primary, I would say 3 points of visual interest for me in fashion. One would be film. My mom would let us take off days in school to watch Hitchcock movies. We really had some great introduction through my mom, especially to kind of film at an early age. So I think a lot of the fashion that capture our imagination. Also, and not to interrupt you, I think our concept of fashion came from costume design even before high fashion, because we didn't grow up in San Francisco where maybe you'd see stores and all of those places, but we grew up seeing really beautiful costumes in in the different channels that would play. And then I think early age, it was that, and definitely the Santa Cruz boardwalk. Going down that boardwalk and seeing punks, skaters, hippies, everything you can imagine. I always say, if you watch the movie The Lost Boys, the opening of that film is a documentary footage shot of the boardwalk during that era. And it's a funny thing. They asked the director, well, you're going to make a movie about teenage vampires. And he's like, I knew where to set Santa Cruz. And it really was this amazing spectacle of individuality. And I think, people using clothes to express things about themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And it's probably like how people felt in New York at certain points. But for me as a kid, that boardwalk was like, we got to get to the boardwalk and see what, everyone shows up wearing. And then I think later in life, Laura was saying, for me, when I was in high school, and probably the same for Laura, it was that point of, I don't know, I guess it would have been the 90s when we were in high school, where it was just seeing paper magazine, things happening in New York. You watch cheap fashion television. I was definitely aware of all the runways happening and kind of just the culture of also people having personal style and really seeing that really had a huge influence on me.
Yeah, it's very funny. My mother was a painter and very, very involved. I was very, influenced by her too. And, I used to watch movies from the 30s and 40s, and I was obsessed with every detail. In fact, I have a collection of jewelry from movies, Joseph of Hollywood and all of those, because I just was obsessed with the beautiful, classic, timeless costumes of clothing, right? That were so much more appealing to me, until then when the 60s started to really kind of come into its own. But I really think childhood is so important in defining. You can really trace back and see, you just described perfectly where the beginning of all of this was. When did you actually decide that this was your dream as sisters, and that you wanted to make it a business? What was the inspiration? What was the catapulting into this world?
I remember, Kate always says she wanted to be a fashion designer. I think that was kind of one of these things that meant different things along your age range. At 7,
Right.
when you're 13, and then it's even more different when you're 20. Because by the time, at a certain point where we're reading Vogues, that started honestly, we were reading Vogue in middle school, junior high. Like, you're really pouring over those pages and really being inspired. And then only later do you realize that it's something you want to do, really. Like, you understand what it takes to become a designer. we both ended up going to UC Berkeley to study. My father had gone there, so it was like an easy college to understand, and it was in California. And I studied English literature. Kate studied art history, and I took a lot of art history classes. So I think that idea of storytelling, I don't believe we ever thought we would use those majors to further a career, but I think what it did was help us take a way of using visual language and subtext and tell stories, and like helped us want to tell stories. So when we were maybe in our junior year in college, like we have to be fashion designers. There were no design courses at our school, but we did take a costume design course for theater, which I quit after like 2 weeks because they were like, the directors would tell you everything you have to make, what color, your colors would be directed by the lighter, the person doing lighting and all this stuff. And so this isn't for me. I would have picked what we're
right.
a little longer. And then I remember us being so upset because they had this bookshelf of 70s Vogues. And they're like, you should cut all these up to make mood boards for costume. What? You can't cut these up. So already, our parents grew up around a lot of antiques. Like, you can't touch these. So we would slowly out of school and carry them down Telegraph Avenue. I found the box. I found the box upstairs in our studio of them. And it's like this, I kind of feel like it's this little relic, this thing that tells us this is when we knew we wanted to be designers. We weren't told what we were making, and no one was going to ever tell us anything. And if we were open to the process, but right after college, we moved home, and I got a job as a waitress, and we knew that we wanted to make some clothing, and we didn't know what that meant, but we figured it out. We literally started working with a team of people we have worked with our entire careers. We saved our money and bought beautiful Italian silks. We made, I think, 11 pieces of clothing, and figured out, I think he drew paper dolls of them and set them around. So it was all these like little organic baby steps. The paper dolls led to Cameron Silver. We sent a letter to Cameron Silver in Los Angeles and said, you know everything about fashion. What should we do? Or these people that know nothing about it. And he told us to kind of outreach to Women's Wear Daily, Bazaar, the different magazines through the mail. And we paper doll packages, drawings of each of the individual garments to the different magazines at the time. And not to interrupt, but I do want to say I now would never have done. Yeah, they were all hand done, each one, because I didn't at the time know how to basically manufacture something where we make one principal one and then.
No, but that's the beauty of it. I mean, that's really the innocence and the purity of something like that. That's why it probably blew everybody's minds. I think I can't imagine.
And we didn't know I'd never been to New York, and we're like, well, Cameron's like, maybe you should go to New York. We're like, okay, we'll try going to New York. And, we stayed with our friend Jen, who was in art conservation school at the time. Like, she had all these relics around her apartment. It was tiny. We didn't even know how to leave the apartment. Like, what's New York City? And, I remember thinking, no one got these paper dolls. We're here for no reason. There's no appointments being made. On our last day, we got a phone call from Women's Wear Daily. They got the paper dolls, and they asked us to come in.
I love it.
Didn't believe it was with Bridget Foley, Bobby Queen, and Nan D'Souza at the time. And they had us come in, and they were like, we showed them these 10 dresses that we made in like 2 coats. And they asked us all these questions. They said, we're going to go take some photos, and we're going to write about you. We're like, it was this huge moment, seemed like this huge moment. And we left, and we didn't really think much about it because we'd never gone through that before. The next day, Cameron called us and said, I think you should go down to the newsstand because you need to go check it out. And we managed to find a newsstand, and they put us on the cover.
That's so great.
And
that's so great.
That's how it started. Like, we had no ability to know how to do anything. We met a few stores right away, like Bikram, Bergdorf Goodman. There's a few retailers that we worked with our entire careers. And it just started this process of saying we are going to make up every step as we go and learn as we go. Yeah. And it was that was a really crazy time because when that all happened, to put it into context too, we really didn't know anyone in the industry. So it wasn't that, so-and-so can introduce us. We didn't know anyone. We didn't have formal background in it. We pretty much, the only way we got to New York was we had saved for years in school. We were like, well, we're going to go on this trip to Italy. We want to see all this art. Yeah. So we put money in this account and then we thought, well, we're going to drain that account and go on this trip to New York. And we went to New York. To be honest with you, it really felt like something out of a movie where people that were coming from, it just was larger than life to us. We didn't, I remember not leaving my friend's apartment that much because I was kind of like, I don't know how to get around. It was, not at all how I feel now, but it really was a kind of exciting time, also terrifying, but also, weirdly enough, I think back on it now, it's almost unbelievable that we even got that call in and we got that cover because it really changed our lives because essentially we met with the Anna Wintour, I think like literally a month later because
wow,
the West Coast editor of Vogue, Lisa Love at the time, saw the article, called us into her office. She said, I want to meet these girls from Pasadena. Keeping in mind, we've only made 10 things. So this is like really early as the book would go on to do. And she said, well, Anna Wintour is going to be in New York, in LA in a few weeks. And I think she's going to want to meet you. And she came and met us and told us, we were obviously so greedy. We were asking all these questions. We didn't know what to do. She meet these fashion designers. Literally one of our questions was, can we be fashion designers stay in LA? Because we had grown up obsessed with, New York City. You have these ideas of Paris. And at the time, I think things are a little different now, but at the time it was really centered on these key cities. And we asked a lot of questions that were kind of like entry level questions. And I remember she said to us at the time, I can really tell your work's personal. So my advice to you is to keep it that way. It was just on what we ended up doing. And in a way, I feel like it's the best advice we ever received.
Yeah, it's definitely. Wow, that's a great story. So you actually made the garments, right? You had the garments made, and so what was the first sort of place that you had that you would call your studio, and how did that all come about?
Well, the first part, before I will say this, we have pieces that we made that are I think they're at the FIT Museum where I'm like, well, I made that at the kitchen table. I'm like, we made that at the back, our grandparents' back house on a kitchen table. I remember, hand sewing. They have one dress that it's really special to me now because we never made that many of those early pieces. And I just think that remember exactly making that. Yeah. And that's how the early collections were. We worked out of our house. We eventually moved into a studio in downtown LA. But I think I remember thinking, if I can impart any advice to someone starting up, I always say, just be as frugal as you can, as long as you can. Because I remember thinking there was a point where we're like, we have to have an office. But the point was, I wasn't willing to spend that money. I really,
right.
And that inclination to be very careful is what let us stay independent the whole time. Because it wasn't about saying, well, everyone else has an office, so I have to have it. So
I know. That's the key.
Yeah, it's the key.
That's the key.
We were like the local FedEx person that delivered fabric to that back house. I still know today. And it's like, and they remember bringing us those big bolts at this little mini back house. But I remember, well, that's how you got to do it. But when we got our first studio, it was in downtown. What hadn't been built up very much in the sense that there weren't a lot of restaurants. There weren't a lot of grocery stores yet. It was kind of, it was a little bit isolating, but it was great. So we were in this old very old bank building. It wasn't, it was different, but it was, we were there for a while. But it's interesting. It has all the memories. I think, period also was the time where, now I feel like there's so many, I think, with technology and all the great things that people have access to. In a sense, I feel like it's so positive because you can find out so much about how to run business, how to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
There just wasn't that access. But the thing that is amazing to me is when I look at all the things that we did do, and Laura and I will say, can you believe that we did a mermaid collection and covered dresses in sand, and then we set those dresses in New Marcus, just sand. I remember being that building, like burning the fabrics, or we did this condor collection where all the fabrics were burnt and sandpapered, and we'd have to go out. It was a little kind of outdoor terrarium type room where we would be out there just with, but now I would never do cigarette lighters burning the fabric. Because the thing we would do that people would tell you now, you don't make clothes like that go into a store. And I think back in that time period, we made the clothes that we wanted to make. And if people bought those clothes, those were the clothes that went into the store. Now we're in a little bit, it's a little different, but it was almost good to not have,
right.
I guess it's so important in my belief as a designer to follow your instinctual progression and figure out your language and who you are. And I think because we didn't necessarily have a rule book, we learned things as we went.
Yeah.
But it does, I think in a way, it helped us in terms of our creativity, but also it helped us run a business. When we say we're independent, the business is ours. There is no outside funding.
Good for you. Good for you.
We're 100% independent. And I realized over the years, people will ask me, and I'll have to explain, no, Laura and I run the business, and that's it. There isn't.
Right. Nobody believes, first of all, because I'm older than you are, nobody would believe that a woman was capable of running a business, and that designers aren't necessarily considered the geniuses of the planet. So we're creative, but the idea that you can be creative and have a good business sense and own your own business and have that freedom to do whatever you want and still figure out how to pay the rent, right? To still make that happen. The idea of when you said frugal, that's the secret. And it's a simple concept, but if you can still do it by spending less money, then you can, if you can still do it by spending less money, it means the chances of longevity for you are great because you will look at everything you do through that lens. And and this is my 57th year now. And I got to tell you, I don't have any partners, just like you guys. I'm free to be. And if I want to do, you were burning hems and I was making dresses with 6 sleeves and whatever, but I still made dresses that sold and paid for things, but I still today can do anything I want. Nobody can tell me as long as I manage to figure out how to cover everything. And that I'm so thrilled to hear. I thought that was true, but I'm thrilled to hear. And I'm thrilled that there will be other people. And it's not about men or women. It's more about being a creative person, being creative women, and having the ability to run your own companies and be independent. Independence is everything.
It's so precious. I'm so grateful to it because, this job tells you spend all your money on brand packaging and all these extra things. But if you have that gem of creativity, that will sell it way more than a fancy logo or a fancy box or a special ribbon. So I kind of think that we just by nature of it, not even really knowing that we were making those choices, we landed there saying, I guess, well, the only way we can create Rodarte is to really believe in the things that we're making and say, this is our bookshelf. And if I pull any of these dresses off of our bookshelf, am I proud of them? I think that's kind of how we started. And I believe that independence is, strangely enough, really hard for the community to wrap their heads around, because most people don't do it because it's really difficult or it's not the standard, and that's totally okay. But the language where people talk about you as an independent is so funny, because you're like, oh, I'm not those things at all, but you've made up this construct of what being independent is. It's just you're aware of everything and no one wants to believe that you can be. And I do. One of the things I realized over, we've kind of, I don't know how long we've had Rodarte. I think it's like almost 20 years. But I think it's 18 years. Yeah. I don't know. Something, I know someone else is always like, when you do an anniversary, more I just aren't that way. So like, well,
no. I haven't ever done an anniversary.
I don't know. I'm like, we didn't even go to our own graduation. So I was like, it's something to happen. But I do think for the industry as a whole, I look back on it. One of the things that's very much missing probably, and obviously like, I'm always so grateful for the amount of people that covered what we've done, or people that are interested in what we're doing. But at the same time, it's, an interesting dialogue. I do think the fact that we're two women that have done it independently, and you spoke about this, which is that it's almost like people just have conveniently ignore the fact that we run our own business, and that it's just almost like most of the dialogue about what we do is, oh, it's so creative. A lot of the early stuff was like, it's so creative. Can it actually be a reality in the marketplace? Can it? So many things that I think aren't given that kind of space to talk about our work. The equivalent is not done with a lot of other, male designers. It was a lot written on our work. And then on top of that, it's almost like conveniently ignoring that we've been running our business for 20 years, which basically not only are we the creative force behind it, we are the business side. And I think that is unfortunately gendered in the media, especially in the fashion media. And I think it would be, it's really important, because you want to see all people and individuality in fashion. And I think people having as many doors as we can open for different creativity and different ideas. It's so important. But I think celebrating independence and kind of acknowledging when that actually happens, it's a way of maybe helping make sure that we can have more people being able to survive and do that, because I think that's so critical to fashion evolving.
Yeah, it's very, as you know, we're very lucky that we've made these choices, right? But, I read a quote by Sam Altman, and it was much longer and far better, but the bottom line was determination overrides everything else. And it's the determination that really, especially when it's tough, I'm sure you can't go through 20 years without some tough times, and you can't go through 57 years without some tough times. And there are many of them. And I remember crying myself to sleep many nights thinking, how the hell am I going to make this work? This is my dream. I have to do it. But the determination is so critical to the survival of your freedom and independence. And I'm sure you guys have had moments, and maybe if you don't mind sharing some memorable moments where you didn't know it was gonna come out okay, or a problem happened and you got past it. I have like a million.
I have so many. Sorry. I mean, there is one. I always say this job is like for every great thing that happens, there's the thing that brings you back down immediately.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
a roller coaster job of
That's it.
learning to even it out. And at the beginning, it was like I took everything so personal. It was so hard when everything bad happened. But I'm a person that's like doesn't dwell on a lot. So I will take it in and then process it and then even out. But then I have to learn to say I can't be that affected by the great moments and the low moments anymore because it's too much of the battle of
Yeah. And they come and go. They come and go quickly. You know, it's like the thing you can depend on is when it's really freaking awful.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to last forever. And when it's really great, it's not going to last forever. And that's the secret, right? It's like don't get comfortable in your misery or in your happiness.
Yeah. I love that you say that because it really brings back a memory that, you know, listen, there's so many. And I agree that whether or not it's on the business side or, you know, 1 minute you're doing well in the store and the next minute you're not doing well. And then, or, you know, it literally, and sometimes you'll spend all this time pulling your hair out trying to get a reason for these types of things. And honestly, there isn't always a logical reason, right? But something that comes to my mind early on was that we did, and I'm going to talk about it because I know that you were in a piece I didn't get a chance to go to the woman dressing woman exhibit, but at the Met, but a dress of ours was in that. And it's a really special piece. And I remember why it was special is Laura and I made our first runway collection in New York. And I felt like it was a kind of a finale gown for us. And I remember saying to Laura, this is who we are as designers, this dress. Everything is going to be about, when we go do collections later on, something about what we've done in this dress. It's going to really be important. And I know that's like a weird thing, but we kind of had a big conversation like that about this dress. Anyway, we did the show. So it was our first show. And we went to a little, I forgot, it was like it might have been the Beatrice Inn. Yeah, the Beatrice Inn. We got there out like a little after party or something. And because we'd never done any of this, we'd never experienced like good or bad reviews because we never really read anything.
Right.
So somebody said, hey, look, there's your New York Times review. Meanwhile, we're excited. So we start reading it and the reviews so all I can say is like, we didn't like the review. But at the end of the review, I was crying and we're supposed to figure out, right? So it was like, you know, I remember it said something like, these two aren't of the modern era. They don't listen to iPod. They probably don't have an iPod. And I was like, what's that have to do with anything? I love how this is the one thing to stay with us. But then it said at the very end, like they just make pretty dresses. And I said to Laura after, so I was crying and I said, I don't think we were, part is our friend on the Wild who had documented most of our shows, for the last 15 years. Like we have a very long relationship where she documented everything we did. He was there and watching all this go down. And I said to Laura, well, you know, first of all, I never want to be ever again. I never want anyone to write, they just make pretty dresses. I was like, they're more than that to me. And I thought, and I don't care what they say, like this thing that we did something in this that we think's bold. Yeah. Well, it was pretty devastating. Flash forward. Not only, I would say years later, the Met acquired that dress permanently. They put it, the first exhibition it went into was the history of Western fashion. And it was, I think, just a few rotating mannequins. It was our dress and like, maybe a Dior or something in this thing. And it was really honestly an exhibition where it was really big. Dior, this, and then our dress was the end of it. And my friend was in New York and she went and saw it and she took pictures of the dress and she cried and she said, this is the dress this was that conversation. She can believe that it's here. Right. Same dress came out into that women dressing women show. And that was an example of what you said. It in the moment, 15 years in the making, in the moment, it was so viscerally upsetting just because people are always going to say positive and negative and in between things.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah. But we had never really experienced that. And I think we also had that determination, that belief in our own work. And it is hard when you have that and you have to realize you're going to have to zone out the outside world. But then to have that for us that seemed important to us be recognized.
Amazing. Yeah.
And that's the advice I would give to people, because it has so many ups and downs. And there are many days where I would think, how can we do this? And I'm lucky that I have a partner. So oftentimes we'll switch. If maybe I've fallen a little too negative or whatever, the other one of us can say, hey, you know, I remember, I also think like the thing about that was a little bit about learning who to listen to, right? Be open-minded, constructive feedback, take it in, but also then to learn to say, but you have to figure your own path through that feedback. It was a journey and a real great setup to, feeling accepted and yet not feeling accepted really early on, I think really builds a backbone for yourself to say how strong to really believe in what I'm making. And I remember, like, strangely enough, thinking about my hardest one. Yeah, like we didn't have our collection done, and I had to fly it the day before our runway show. So
that's a nightmare. Those are nightmares.
The whole thing is in New York, because we always have to take everything to New York. You have to set up in New York. You have to rent a space in New York. So everything's difficult to do the show. And yet the clothes just weren't done on time. And I really was the last person there with all these trunks at the time, and show up and it worked out. I don't know. I remember crying with the people working on the pieces. They were so complicated. I was like, can't we get these done faster? And like, everyone's like, no. So that was the hardest journey, saying, I'm going to make it, even if it's the last moment. We had a show where, the shoes all broke the night before.
It's just nobody understands how difficult it really is to have deadlines 4 times a year and want to create beauty and want to put heart and soul and everything into what you do. And I don't think there's any other industry that on a consistent, like, you can do a film and then you take a break, but you finish, you're already on the next thing. And so we're programmed that way. And so obviously we wouldn't keep doing it if there wasn't some magic for us in it. But at the same time, when people get to know you and they see how hard you work, they think like, you are crazy. What? Are you nuts? Yeah. And I was like, you probably, but my worst story, as you were saying this, was I remember the first time I showed swimwear, and I wasn't doing any wholesale. I had a shop and I was doing a lot of one of a kind kind of clothes. And, but then I had the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine, and that was it. If Scovolo took the picture, and it was a bathing suit that was nothing like any other bathing suits. All swimsuits had big full bottoms, and this was very high leg and a bikini, and it was whatever, strings all over it. And it was a big hit. And so we had a lot of requests. So I thought maybe this is the time to do it wholesale, so we have more numbers and we can manufacture it in a better way. So I had an appointment with Bloomingdale's, and the buyers came in and they wanted to see the swimsuits, and I was showing them over jeans and whatever I was thinking. They came in, they sat down, they didn't take their coats off. We had a few models and they just got up and walked out. They didn't say anything. And I'd never shown a collection before. And I said, this is really weird. I don't understand the business. I guess they don't say anything and they just come in and leave. I really believe that was the way it was done. And until everybody said, no, I don't think they liked it. And they didn't want to tell you and they walked out. It was so shocking to me that you just don't say anything. And it's when it's the first time, like, what do you know?
And it's so crazy. How do you not take it personal? You're making something. You're creating.
I of course did meet the leader of that group at a meeting years later. And of course, I never forgot her. And she was at a place wanting to win me over to do a business deal. And I just had to retell the story. I said, I'm sorry. I have to tell the story because it's so embedded in my brain and I never thought I would meet you again. And I was very sweet about it, but it was like, it's just like somebody gives you encouragement like Anna or Women's Wear Daily. It has so much meaning and so it keeps you going. But then a bad review that is just stupid and in your heart there's something special about what you did. You have to really, you have to be strong to get through that. And just like, now what do I do? Should I still do this? Should I maybe not do swimwear? You start to question what you're doing. What sign are you guys?
I'm an Aquarius, Laura's a Virgo. Yeah. So we're like,
really?
Yeah.
Really? What a great combination. Of course.
It's such a good combination. I think
it's so good. That's amazing. That's really, really great. So how do you decide who's doing what? Does it stay the same each season or do you change it up? What's the protocol for that?
Honestly, I don't really do anything separately. So I've heard of design partnerships where people are like, oh, I do this and sketch these separate. We come together. I think we kind of sometimes will sketch ideas down as I would do a meeting, but it doesn't work as well. We like to sit together, talk out ideas, put them up on the wall and say, what does this make you think? And then we push it forward. I think we're like snowball type of workers where we start with something little and we see things and it inspires us and we add more. So like you were saying earlier, working with these timelines has always been really hard because it's not like we sketch a collection, it's up on the wall and that's what we make.
No.
I'd say 50% of the sketches never get discussed again after they're on that board. 25% don't look anything like the original sketch.
Right.
And, 25% have a semblance of it. So we are constantly saying, how do we make something better? So it means us talking to each other all the time. Kate will ask a lot of questions. I'll ask a lot of questions. Someone has an idea that we think, oh, that's a good idea to start with. And I don't think there's much division except for maybe I text back a little bit more than Kate does. But I know she really likes to answer certain emails and I like to answer certain emails. We have a shared work email that confuses everybody. That way, always know that what's important we will both see. And I think someone will see because the amount of information that comes in and out every day is a lot. So someone's seeing, hopefully, that I couldn't tell you from selections who did what, who thought of what, or when was there a fight over, putting, it's like we don't always, even though I think we're so symbiotic, we are definitely coming from, and we have a shared childhood, we have a spring, for instance, we have the same interest in film and art, literature, the things that get us excited about creating. So in a sense, we're kind of drawing from a similar well. But I think we do have differences, and oftentimes, or I might have an idea that I don't like, say, and then it turns out to be this great idea. Or
Right.
I if she's not into, and then we end up doing it.
Yeah.
When we have those types of disagreements in the creative space, what I can honestly say is they work themselves out in a very organic way. And anything that's meant to be an collection or meant to get made, find a way of coming to life. And we're not really rigid. And I think this has helped us. We don't pigeonhole, or we don't, we're not rigid in our roles for each other. Right. I don't say to Kate, well, I'm a little bit more organized. You should never be the organized one. Some days I'm like, why are you being, you needed to take on organizing this. I can't do it. Yeah. So I think it's been really helpful that
That's great.
If someone's feeling less creative, if someone's feeling less motivated, if you're more hurt by a bad review or something someone said, the other person can go in and lift you up. And that's the joy of partnership. And it's been both on both ends, like, where it gets too much. And you're like, I really don't feel like making another custom gown. I can't do another sketch, And then someone will say, well, I have an idea. So yeah, partnership has always benefited us because it's like this great emotional support system. And also just the creative process is often, I think we just love creating in a way that's, I would say everything that when I go through our archive, for some reason we pull something out that we haven't seen in a long time. What I find now, because it changes, like, the beginning, it's more naive. And for us, it's because we really didn't know anything about our industry. We learned everything kind of as we did it. And now I've had more information and more, different thoughts. So when I pull out pieces, I can see like, well, we really made this because we had this creative idea and we wanted to bring it to life. Yeah. And we're telling, and it's really genuine. And I think in an industry that's a lot more product based than even when we started. When we started, it still felt like I would be like, before we started, I remember that the Midwest was going to have a runway in the 90s. Yeah, stop what we're doing. Now I feel like, and there's nothing wrong with this. There's a lot of product and a lot of shows, a lot of information. Like that's not why we created anything. I've never created a single runway collection and been concerned with product. I hope that I make something that someone buys and 30 or 40 years later, they're still valuing that. It's not fast commodity. They need to get rid of it. Wanted it in the moment. Now they don't want it. And because to me, great design is the thought. It's not necessarily that something's couture or not. For me, it's more the idea. It's the idea.
Yeah. But you guys, not only do you have incredible ideas, but going back to your roots, it's beyond fashion. You're really creating art that you can wear, art that you can save, art that you can display in your house. It's like, it really is in that level that I have such an appreciation for what you do, because you've defined your work in a very special way. And those pieces, are not only collectible, but they, are, like I said, pieces of art that you could gift to your children and not you guys, but anybody that buys it or that. And then looking at the art the way you would look at pieces of art and the evolution of a painter or an artist and how their early work had this kind of a feeling. That's the way I feel about what you guys do. And I think it is incredibly appreciated. And if people, I can't believe there's anybody saying anything negatively about you. It can't be. It's just impossible, because then they're idiots. I can't imagine, because you've proven over and over that this authentic, creative process that is a business, is sort of a forever concept that nobody can criticize because of what it is. I think it's beyond, a fashion collection. It is that. In its purpose, it's the way you sustain your business. It makes sense. But I really commend you on combining the value of art into what you do, and that you continue to do it, and you do it, in surprising, exciting ways that I'm trying to, like, in listening to the two of you, I think I'm understanding, especially now that I know you're an Aquarius and you're a Virgo. I get it. I get it completely. It's perfect, right? It answers all the questions. So when did you learn how to sew and learn the craft of actually dressmaking, and how did you learn that? And how did you learn that part of the business?
Well, part of me was like, I started sewing. Well, I was going to say, I actually was, like quilt making, and, was not like making, we would kind of we grew up doing that. My mom, made all that. Yeah. She did all of her own clothes when she was a teenager. Yeah. It was part of the culture. You made your own clothes. My mom taught us to sew.
Yeah.
That more as a project, not for our own clothing, but, you can make something you choose you want to wear.
Yeah.
I have a famous, terrible first project that I made. But it's the white pair of overalls with like a red pocket and turtles on it. So I did that like in grade school. Yeah, we're always like, that may be the first thing beside my life. But, I think that, and I think, and certainly in some of the earlier collections, I remember there was one dress we did that had all these flowers on it, and we had to hand sew all the flowers on the dress for production. Yeah. And I just remember that was the last, we would do other things in the production that were like specialized, but I just remember like having to do this event, and doing it. But I think too, one of the great things, and I always say this to people, because one of the great things about, I think, design is, you work with so many creative people, and we work with so many amazing sewers, and so many pattern makers. And it's kind of like being a filmmaker in a sense where it's a similar thing. You have all these people that come together to make something beautiful. And even on your runway show, show producers or models that are participating, the larger family. But I guess always it was just really something that we grew up. I would say we grew up around, if that makes sense. It just didn't feel something. I asked my mom once, because my mom's so talented. She can make these beautiful weavings, blooms, and weavings, and mosaics, and she's an amazing artist. And she is Mexican, born in the United States. Her father is from Central Mexico, and she would say, I'd spend my summers in Mexico, and I would just see people making things, and I would make things. She's like, I would see people weaving. I wanted to weave. I knew I could do it. I saw people doing things with their hands, and I thought, well, I guess that's part of what we've learned from her, and the idea every dress has been touched by people, that you are making decisions. That's all very specific. And I remember making our first interview in Vogue. It was with Andre Leon Talley, and he's like, what are these waves and these ruffles on here? It's so unique. And I was like, those are inspired by fungal shells, I don't know if anyone had ever said that within the walls of Vogue at the time, but we were definitely listening to nature and natural elements as a way of creating a dress.
I had my mother sewed her clothes also, and mine, when I was young. And then, of course, obviously we've all had this similar experience where the mother influence is so incredibly impactful because it is so extraordinary. I mean, there wasn't anything my mother couldn't do. She did crocheting and knitting and weaving and all kinds of things, and grew herbs and stuff. You know, it was her art studio basically, and I was a recipient of this observing like you guys did, and then sewing my clothes. I remember sewing myself into my pants because I could never get a zipper right. And I would take a needle and thread with me when I went out dancing so that I could go to the bathroom and a seam ripper to sew myself back in. But the, I mean, how fortunate we are that we had that so that it's a natural part of what you do. There are so many designers who don't sew and don't know how to make a pattern, don't have any connection to that. They may sketch, but I think that the idea of being able to, I love making patterns. I just love it. I find it's like reading a book to me. I get lost in it. I enjoy it so much, and still. So I'm sure there's so much enjoyment when you're excited about what you're doing and that you can have a hand in the actual product. It's a big benefit of this work that we do. My question for you now is, as you know, so much is digital. I mean, there's more pattern makers who don't do things by hand. More pattern makers are working digitally. A lot of the sketching, I mean, to me, having a sketch pad and having ink or paint or pencil on my hands and feeling the paper is everything. And there are so many other choices now in how you do that. What are your thoughts about integrating digital and technology into what you're doing? Or is it something that you feel you need to do?
I don't feel, the thing is that I think everyone's going to have a different perspective on this because it's, on some sense, really inevitable, as the culture changes and technology evolves and people, we have different cycles of people being born and growing up in a different language and a different landscape, then obviously things change. For me personally, I have to follow my own artistic kind of what makes me feel like creating and what is particular to mine. I think for Laura and I were probably, it's not that computers don't get used. Like we have people in our office that can do, we can have a computer drawing made, we can do those things. I will say in terms of us sketching collections by hand, I think we're very much more about, a lot of the fabrications we've done over the years were hand dyed. We would, instead of making prints, if we wanted a marble print, we hand mark. Everything is this tangible creative process for us. And I think even when we went on to we made a film, it was very little was done in post. Most everything was done in camera. And I think that's just our process. So for me, I find beauty and the creative dynamic process in something more tactile. I personally am not so reliant on needing that type of technology. In fact, I don't know. And I don't think that's going to change for us. And I'm okay with that because for me, it's just like, that's what makes me make the dresses or the clothes the way that we make them.
Yeah. What about your own your personal sense of style? For an example, when I'm doing the collection, which seems like it's every day of my life, but it's there. Like when I'm really in the throes of it, I have to disappear. Like I can't wear something that's going to get in the way of seeing it. Do you know what I mean? So I'll wear a t-shirt and like invisible clothes almost. I try to, I don't even, it's just a natural thing. I can't interfere physically with that. So, and then I discover my own personal style and how it connects to what I do. And so I'm wondering about the two of you and how you, like what you think about, because we are women who wear clothes and we obviously wear our own clothes, right? I mean, how could we not? And so how do you deal with your personal wardrobe when you're working, when you're not? Like how do you both, address your personal style?
I like to have a uniform. I can bend it out on the ground in, and I can go dig in a box in that I am like you. It's an invisible outfit. I'm not thinking about it. There is nothing in the choice. I don't care what I wear in the morning, and I'm not spending my precious decision making in the morning thinking about it. And it's so much to the point where, like, if you do have to go to an event and you're thinking about, you're like, this takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of creativity. So you do know that is a creative space, and it does take your energy. Yeah. I like to be as neutral as possible. I just like to feel comfort knowing that I have to do physical labor sometimes. Yeah. I have to move bolts around and get dressed and make stuff. Yeah. And so
it's a physical, there is some physical work. You know, I wear this ring. If you guys have any of these trackers, if you tracked just your typical day, if you tracked your steps and all of the activities, it's a workout, like lifting up fabrics. I'm on the floor most of the time. It's like, there's nothing, there's no, like you can't get dressed. And you're right, to take the time in the morning to think about what you're going to wear. I could be designing something now. I could be like, this is valuable time in the morning when your brain is like ready to go. Do you ever?
And I used to, like,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go on the tangent, not important.
Actually, where do you think your ideas come from? Is it sometimes I actually wake up from a dream,
right?
And I've seen this thing that I'd never seen before in my dream, and I love it, and I have to do it. I have to take it. What is the process for you? I know there's no formula to this, but what do you think your inspiration is?
Well, I love this question. Well, I have the immediate answer because the inspiration comes from where it comes from. It can come from. I always just say, keep your eyes and ears open, because anything that you see in your day can spark something. Number one, an idea or like an idea for a collection, something that you're really inspired by. I'll listen to it. And that's what's happened with our collections over the years, but small ideas, daily ideas. I'll be walking into the back of the studio, going to get a bolt of fabric, and you just get a little ding, and it says idea, and you're like, okay, I better write that down, or I better draw it, I don't forget. I've been in places where I'm stepping into the shower. It's been a long day. I'm exhausted. I was like, I have no more left to give you the day. Don't talk to me. Just benefiting. And then I get an idea the minute the hot water hits. So I don't know. You just have to have faith in the fact that creativity just sometimes comes to you and you can't force it. And it's not about sitting down at a table and having ideas ever.
Yeah. No, that's not a good one.
No, mine always been, I have ideas like exactly like, I've been. And I also feel that Kate sends me a lot of text messages with a lot of ideas. And I go, okay, I'm so overwhelmed. We will talk about all of these texts that you just sent me tomorrow. And mine coming from, I think it's interesting you said dreams, because I think even when it's almost like an unconscious, a stream of conscious dream state, or in a sense where ideas really come from. Because when I look at certain collections in retrospect, there might have been certain things where, maybe I saw this thing and it inspired me. And, and we ended up doing, one collection that comes to mind that was more based in like a literal inspiration, which was we were at the North Side in Pasadena, which is a museum, and there's a portrait of Van Gogh's mother, his portraits there. And then that same day we went up to see west to the Mount Wilson Observatory, which is in LA, where it's kind of scientifically one of the more important observatories in the world. They discovered the universe was in. And we went up and we were getting a tour and getting to see the old kind of telescopes. And Laura and I put those two things together, and we said, Van Gogh's Starry Night and his obsession with night and these colors, it's really, reminiscent of these images we're looking at about space and outer space. And so we combined the two elements. We took Van Gogh prints and the prints. We spent a lot of time working on them. They were, if you looked up close, they were kind of digitized, where we put real nebulas and starry night. So it wasn't from the distant view, they just looked like Van Gogh paintings, but when you got up close, you could see they weren't. And that was a collection kind of just coming out of us living our everyday lives. We had done this together. But then there are things that my mom will say, do you remember I think it started that we got to the observatory and they were showing us all these images they had taken of sunspots. Oh yeah. And we're like, oh my gosh, these sunspot images look exactly like his sunflower. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the start of it too. Right. And they looked so similar, and it was so unique to someone like that long ago without that technology would be able to paint something that looked like something that's very real and very, and then other times sometimes my mom will say, well, the way that you put those colors together reminds me of how my aunt used to dress. And I think, you know what, there's some things, even though I never knew my mom's aunt, I know stories of her. I never met her. She died before I was born. There are some things that are just in you, and there is an explanation. Maybe that was just something that somehow travels from my mom's aunt to her, and that's coming out of me, and it's just and I totally about memory and dream state or memory. I think those are the things that actually really are meaningful in your work. And you might not necessarily know, maybe they come to you in a dream, maybe they come out in a different way, but I don't know if I can ever really figure out where they come from or why. But I think it's always about I've always thought, well, creativity is just a way of trying to communicate. I'm not really sure if I'll ever know what it was. Why did I feel like I needed to communicate through clothes or communicate through other mediums? And I'm not sure if I had an answer, maybe I want to keep doing it. So maybe part of the interesting part of the process is that it's a constant kind of desire to do that, because maybe I won't, I don't know, maybe magically one day I'll figure it out where all this,
I think the desire to be interested in that, to be excited by it, is where the creative process is. Everybody else that was at those places saw the same thing you saw, except you saw it in a different context. And I think that's, for me, one of the things I realized early on, that I could, in the 70s, I had a lot of very creative friends who unfortunately did not survive AIDS. And we would go to all of these places that were packed with inspiration. And it would be like we were on crack. We were so drunk with ideas and creative thoughts, and we couldn't wait to put it into something, to make it into something. And then I could be with another group of friends and it would be a completely different experience. And I think we're lucky, and you guys, can share that together, which is really so extraordinary. And when you share it with someone who's creative, it's like a whole other level. It's just, it's such it's a high of, it's the way for me that I get high. I'm totally addicted to what I do. And I have moments of getting so high on something happening the way I wanted it to, or even better, right? How many times does it end up, your sketch you thought was pretty good, but it ends up so much better because you're not locked into it?
I love that. It's my favorite thing. I literally say you have to be strong enough creatively to say I have to nail the idea that I set out to be and not get too far away from it. But you have to be completely open-minded to change everything and to do your best to the last minute, especially if you're doing a show or you're presenting something, to the last minute, think, how can I make this better?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that took me all this time to figure out how to do. Like every step of this has been, how can I take this idea and make it even better and make the landing of it better happen? So, that is that experience of the excitement and the adrenaline carries you through. It's super thrilling. You can't explain it to someone else, but in that moment, when you have an idea and you really think it's starting to grow and tell something, you get more and more ideas.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You can't contain them. I can't make all the things that we have ideas for. We did, we were working on, doing the ballet costumes and Black Swan, the film. Yeah. And
first of all, I mean, you were the right people. Whoever had the sense to invite you to do that was brilliant. And then what you did, unforgettable, just really beautiful.
Well, it makes me happy to hear you say that one, because sometimes you don't look at things for, we have we have the archive of those costumes.
Oh, you do? You do.
But we don't pull them out and look at them. And, unless they're going into a museum or for an exhibition, which, doesn't happen once or twice. That was a great example of what you're saying, because, well, first of all, we were pretty young when we did that. So I remember, we sat down and we sketched up ideas and we had a real creative freedom in that process. But I just remember we were working on her crown, Natalie's crown, and which, by the way, we'll give Natalie a little bit of the, she is the one that had the idea to have us do that.
Yep.
So we were working on the crown, and, obviously at this point, you could 3D print, but we weren't interested in doing that. It's definitely like something that maybe wasn't really needed. Not you could have been new.
Right.
And the instruction was, okay, well, we're going to make this crown, but we had sketched it out, but we knew that we wanted to forge it out of metal, and because it was about this character and this is the idea that we had, but it couldn't be too heavy because for the dancing, it would be impossible for the ballerina. But what was so cool when we were making the crown was that it was like we had the idea, but then we just had a little freedom. It was like, okay, we started with something on paper, but then we're like, well, if we use copper and the shards get burned, it'll be light if it's going to be jagged. And what was interesting was then the crown couldn't really be reproduced.
Oh yeah,
so we couldn't make multiples of it because we weren't able to. Everything was organic and kind of free. Like we just did things, and then we weren't physically doing that. We worked with someone that was amazing that did the
Right.
math. But it's kind of that thing of having an idea that, you know, we knew kind of where we were going. We had parameters. We wanted it to be, you know, made out of metal. We wanted it to feel a certain way. But then by the time we got to making it, just letting go. And, you know, sometimes when I see that crown or that image, I'm like, it just, we hadn't done it that way and not been afraid to stick with some like, you know, okay, well, this is the sketch. It's our approved sketch. We just, and whether you notice, like, you can't draw burnt copper in a sketch.
Right.
Yeah, we're talking here. You say this is a starting point. This is an idea. And then you trust, you build relationships with the very, like the top talents working in what they do. You know, if you are creative, you will find the person that creatively matches you in their physical that they do. And that's how garments get made. Like, you know, every person we work with, they come to you as an artist and you communicate to them artists. And that's how you get a great piece, whether it's the pattern or the dress or the crown or a bag. Like, you know, I think that has been our experience the whole time. And finding people that don't limit themselves either. You know what I mean? Like finding the people. I think we've done that, but let's figure out a new one.
Yeah. It's really important that the people you work with understand the attitude to how you have to approach things and not be rigid. People that are rigid really are unhappy most of the time because it's just that's not life. What happens for me, I'll explain where I'll have a great sketch and a great idea. And then in a sample, I look at it and I hate it. I mean, it's beyond hate. I can't believe that it went so south and just looked so bad. And sometimes I'll spend time trying to save it. And it'll turn out to be something completely different. And other times I know after the third try, it's just, I need to let it just die and move on. You know, how do you deal with that?
Oh my gosh, Kate, I have that sometimes. It's the real emotional battle. It's not like the excitement of seeing something great in the bidding is so different from the trying to be on and saying, this is not what I want at all.
It's terrible.
And I don't know where to start. Yeah. Sometimes I say, if I don't know where to start, I'm putting it to the side. If I know where to start, then maybe it's salvageable. But it's such a difficult feeling to say. I've learned sometimes that asking, you never know. You never know when it's not going to come out right. Which it gets you nervous. I always remember that nervous feeling. Okay, especially if it's like we're doing sometimes it's just individual bidding, but most of the time I'd say, I'm working on a collection. It's like a group of things we're going to see. And I really always going to the first, and it's not like you're not seeing things as you're working on them getting made, but it's kind of your moment to really look at it and say, problem solve, like what's working, what's not working.
Right.
And I just always have real nervous energy because of exactly what you're saying. And it is, I will say, probably some of the great, exciting moments have actually been in those fittings that no one witnesses, where you put something on and even if it's not done, that it's going to be this like piece that you're thrilled or excited about. It feels like this is why you're meeting. And then there's the other moments where, as Laura, I think there's two states for us. Middle ground, which is usually Laura, the Virgo, will say, I know how to fix it. And I'm going, oh, okay. Or there's what you said can happen where you have to know when to just let it go. We don't know where it is, but there's a green felt out we made that we feel like when we were just felt like at one point, like it just looked too much like an elf, it's not like we can't let go. It stopped us from using the color green for so long because we were so shocked. So something that seemed so cute, cool on paper could be there was nothing wrong about how to,
Right.
it just looks like the wrong type of look. And I would think about it all the time because it does remind me. I think what I learned to do in the fittings, because usually are fitting more looks than one, I learned to say, if you see the thing that's a problem, take it off and come back to it at the end. Because also the person that goes into the fitting and I see something that I think turned out great and suddenly have 20 new ideas. So I'm like, oh, maybe if I fit the things that I think are working, that I can come back and in a level-headed way, say, this is how we salvage that, or this is just,
I agree. I do the same thing. The things that look, they're almost there or they're there. I deal with those first. And then I deal with the most difficult last because it can be draining, or it can be exciting, but I don't want to get drained before I start the whole process. And sometimes I can just put something aside and I'll just say, put this aside. And then the next morning I'll wake up thinking, oh, I know what I'm going to do with that. Or it may be 2 weeks that I see it and it's just irritating me. It's like, all right, somebody's got it. Like, let's get that off the mannequin. Cannot look at that anymore. But it's a real, I mean, think about the amount of emotional involvement you have, right? In a collection.
Right. Well, and everything you do takes your time and energy. That sketching, design, and all the work. The idea of giving up on something just seems like the worst idea and the worst option possible because so much money and time goes into it. So it's almost like you're creatively frustrated, but then frustrated just by the business end of losing now. So I always say, because it's so loaded, come back to it. Also, it's just, it's so exactly what you said. And then I was just going to say too, you had brought up determination. And I think if that is one of the things that you absolutely have to have, no matter, different ways you could be a designer, if that's kind of the thing that everyone's going to have a commonality with, that's going to go into that fitting. So it is hard to eventually just say, you know what, let's scrap this idea. It's not working. But it often happens. And sometimes it happens. Sometimes you make something and it gets cut anyway, this doesn't seem to really work in the show last minute. And it's doesn't feel, sometimes Laura and I will try to say, well, if the outfit's not great, why put it on the runway? What's the, so you cut then too. So
editing is a big part of it. And sometimes what I loved at the beginning is just dropped out and it's hard to believe. And I'm the one that's doing the slashing and burning. I'm like, it's gotta go. And then my sales team will say, no, no. And I'm like, yes, it has to go. Because you put on a different headset. If you own your business, you have to look at it holistically. So you're looking at it in that way. What I'm curious about is, so when you're not working, do you have hobbies or things that you do? Now, our work is also our hobby. And I don't know how to separate that. But when I mean hobby, like things that are not necessarily creative or things that you do, what are those that, like, it could be, I love Scrabble to kind of disappear into, like, what do you do?
For me, I love reading. I love listening to books on, audiobooks or actually reading a book. I love films, so we'll often go see movies together. Or with our friends. I love going, different restaurants, especially in LA. I like going to like the old timey ones that have been around for a long time. Just exploring LA, going. But I love we like going to garden. There's a lot of, because we're there's the Wisconsin gardens, Huntington gardens. There's like a lot of things where it's just nice to get out and walk around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, so for me, it's kind of, those are the things that I feel like a lot of my spare time is spent doing. I don't really, I like going to galleries and to see art. That's something I don't have to do. I have to do that a lot.
Yeah. And what are your, what does the home look like? How do you like your environment? How would you describe your environment?
My environment, I like having art. I like to see, like, I love living with, whether it's things my friends made or stuff that I've gotten over the years, or, I have like my favorite thing in my bedroom is a cabinet filled with, my boyfriend kind of gives me different ceramics, and it's just over. And then it's got something. My mom made all this stuff in the 60s. Like one of my favorite things, she made this toaster, this ceramic toaster. And I just love looking at it. So it's interesting. I don't know what it is about these objects that gives me so much joy, but it's kind of a simple thing. It's just this cabinet, and I love to stare at it. But, I like things like personal things. We have a lot of things that my mom, or I had a lot of, different mom.
And do you guys live in different places, different parts of town, or do you live in the same?
At Pasadena, and our studios, and I would say kind of downtown. Yeah, so there's a commute, and Kate doesn't drive, so I drive her.
I
do have a driver.
How do you live in LA?
I have to absolutely this is the newest adventure. So if somebody out there is going to end up being mine. I did drive. I do have a license. I stopped driving, and now I have to drive again. So I'm like, it's just too hard. So this is I don't know if it's a New Year's resolution, but it's like, I'm going to be picking up the driving again. So we'll see how that goes. We'll find out. I think I might actually get a driving teacher. But they do. They have classes. Yeah. So I'll tell you.
I failed my test 3 times. I gave up. I'm not doing it. It's not worth it. It's not for the good of mankind. It's not worth it.
No, so it is. It's a responsibility, and it's hard to stay focused on it. I don't know. I'm hilarious. I just was like, I could use this time to be thinking about all these things. Of course, I made up all these, reasons for not driving, but it is hard because so much of LA is getting around the car, and
I mean, it doesn't seem possible. What about you, Laura? What do you like around you?
Friendliness. I don't spend tons of time. For example, at the studio, I'm the type of person where I have a deadline and suddenly focused on the mess in the back. Oh. And I go, I want to go clean out that drawer with zippers that have been, I have this innate sense to want things to get put away, to have less stuff, but there's no version of my life where I don't have a lot of things on it, so that's okay. I think I'm a minimalist, but I like really ornate things. So I'm not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't like bare walls, and I like I like a really beautiful frame around art, or I like a lot of rustles on a dress, like things like that. If I'm personally going to put something on, I like something a little bit straightforward, but then it has a really strong detail. So I feel like that's in all of my life about everything. But then, and then sometimes when I think about gardens, I go, I don't really like manicured gardens. Really, I like to walk through them, but I prefer just seeing everything everywhere, which is interesting now that I think about that. Yeah.
And so I'm getting the wrap up signal here, and I could talk to you forever, but what are individually, what are your dreams? We all start with a dream, right? And it keeps manifesting and growing and expanding. But for the time we live in right now, which is so complicated and confusing, and what we do could bring people joy and happiness and feeling good, which I think we do. We try to do anyway. But what kind of dream do you have, either for yourselves or individually or for something? What is that thing that you think about that might be something that actually you can make happen in the future or in the near present future?
In a small way, I've been asking that of myself lately because fashion's changed so much. And I have to talk to myself and say, it's no different than when we first started, in the sense that I have to readjust and say, well, fashion, instead of me trying to fit into the landscape of fashion, I always have to remind myself, how do I make fashion work for me and what I can do for it, and like what I enjoy out of it? I have to make it work for what I find enjoyable, because otherwise you get so overwhelmed with all the things you have to do and all.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that I don't think I'm a very good long lead planner. I am so short term. I am literally non-committal, but I'm the most committed person. But I don't like thinking about a 5-year plan. If someone asked you what a 5-year plan is, I'd be like, well, everything. Well, I want everything, you know? So the idea of like a dream is really about saying, being really excited about like positivity and Rodarte. Like that's exciting to me. I think about the creative endeavors, you know, Kate and I are working on a second film, getting that.
Oh my God. That's great.
We've talked about a TV show for a very long time. We've been working on that for a long period. So we have different things that you work on. And the only way I can think to make them happen is just to keep the short term. I don't know why. But I guess I have to work on it, because the big, I don't know. I feel like I'm always living the big dream, just doing certain things. So I don't get too carried away. I don't know. I guess that's my Virgo. I know. I was like, I thought you were a good long term planner. I feel like I'm very bad at it. I'll go with that. I got where you were going. Yeah. I was like, okay, I see what you mean. But this was a really good question, because I mean, listen, on a personal level, you know, I think I'm so, you know, grateful to have the people in my lives that I have, spending time with them for, you know, the special moments, because I think those are the things that actually lead to creativity in the long run, is maintaining the things that inspire you. People around me inspire me. But if it was more like, what are, you know, creative dreams that you have that may or may not, because I think the only thing I can really offer is that I make something and maybe someone else takes that thing and then they do something interesting with it, or they make their own, you know, it's kind of that connectivity where you can make something, but maybe the thing that, you know, that maybe the thing someone else makes becomes, you know, more interesting even. So it's kind of an interesting web of creativity that you share. And I hope that, and I think that's a really important way that we can communicate and understand each other. But for me, like in the aspirations of what I feel, you know, I definitely feel like, you know, we've been working on our second film for a while. So it's time. I think we're going to try to shoot it in the next year, which is
really,
yeah. And I'm really excited about that. And I think I have a dream. I wanted to do opera costumes. It was stuff. Yeah, I love opera. I was like, so putting that into the world, that is amazing.
Oh my God.
You know,
oh my God. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Feel like
I think I think what you do really is so perfect for film and for theater and dance. And, I'm so glad that you're thinking about that. I love it, and that you're working on it. What you do needs to be seen over and over again. It can't be just seen once, you know. It's not one fashion show, yes,
Right.
but it has to. I think the life that you give to something that's like theater or film, it's just magic. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward. And my takeaway from this is that as closely that the two of you work together, you are still clearly individuals.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful, and there's such great respect for one another, but you're both total individuals that are part of this package that you put together. And it's really brilliant to see. And it was really so special. And I'm glad we had the time to speak with each other. And maybe when you get the film going, we talk about it again. I'd love to connect. Thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you for having us. We're so excited. I think we're seeing how much your work and you mean to us. And it's just so, I don't think if you asked me when we started Kate, years from now, you're going to have this conversation with Norma. I'd like, no way. Yeah. The fact that we are here talking to you and you're one of the big people that continues to inspire us and just has done so much for fashion. And I think art is just really, I have to say, it's a pinch me moment. So really honored. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. It's really so, I'm thrilled. I love your work. I'm such a big fan, and I can't wait to see what you'll be doing next. So I have to speak to you again when the film comes out.
Yeah.
It's a deal. It's a deal. Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.